When I discovered my husband had been living a double life for 26 years, my first reaction wasn't rage or heartbreak. It was this strange floating sensation, like my body had become untethered from reality itself. I remember thinking, with an odd clarity that still haunts me, that I must be having a stroke. That was the only logical explanation for why the world had suddenly stopped making sense. Because the alternative, that everything I'd believed about my life was a carefully constructed lie, was simply too enormous to comprehend. My name is Diane Marie Harris. I'm 69 years old now, sitting in my sunny little apartment in La Jolla with my cat Whiskers, purring on my lap. 5 years ago, if you'd told me this is where I'd end up, I would have laughed in your face. Back then, I was Mrs. Mark Harris, living in our beautiful 4-bedroom house in Point Loma, planning my retirement alongside the man I'd loved since I was 23 years old. I thought I knew every chapter of our story. I was wrong about everything. This isn't easy to talk about, even now. But I'm sharing my story because somewhere out there, there's another woman living the same lie I lived. She's making excuses for late nights and unexplained absences. She's convincing herself that the nagging feeling in her gut is just paranoia or insecurity. She's choosing to believe because the alternative is too terrifying to face. I was that woman for 26 years. 26 years of my life, given to a man who was also giving those same years to someone else, to a whole other family I didn't even know existed. Before I go any further, I need you to do me a favor. If you're settling in to hear this story, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. I know that sounds like a strange thing to ask right now, but here's why it matters. Channels like this survive on your support, and every subscription means another woman might find these stories when she needs them most. Real stories, real strength, real survival. And if you're already feeling that knot in your stomach, that recognition of something familiar, please hit the like button. It takes 1 second, but it helps this reach other women who need to know they're not alone. And I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop your city or country in the comments. It reminds me that we're part of a global community of survivors and supporters. Thank you for being here. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. San Diego in 1979 was a different world. I was 23 years old, working as a receptionist at a dental office in North Park, living with 2 roommates in a cramped apartment where we had to take turns using the single bathroom every morning. My parents, Robert and Jean Carson, had moved to San Diego from Indianapolis in 1965, chasing the California dream like so many Midwestern families back then. Dad worked as a machinist at General Dynamics, and Mom cleaned houses to make ends meet. We weren't poor, but we certainly weren't rich. We were working-class folks who believed in hard work, honesty, and that if you did right by people, they'd do right by you. I grew up in City Heights, in a small 2-bedroom house on Fairmount Avenue that my parents scraped together enough money to buy in 1967. I shared a bedroom with my younger sister, Linda, who was 3 years younger than me. We were close, the way sisters are when they only have each other, and a shared bedroom, the size of a shoebox. Linda was the wild one, always pushing boundaries, staying out late, dating boys our parents didn't approve of. I was the good girl, the responsible one, the daughter who always came home on time and never caused trouble. I met Mark at a company picnic in September 1979. The dental office where I worked was part of a larger medical building, and the building manager organized this big barbecue at Mission Bay for all the tenants. I remember wearing my favorite yellow sundress, the one with little white flowers on it that I'd saved up 3 paychecks to buy. Mark was there representing his company. He worked in medical equipment sales, selling supplies to doctors' offices and hospitals. He was 28, 5 years older than me, and I thought he was the most sophisticated man I'd ever met. He was tall, about 6'2", with thick dark hair that he wore a little longer than was fashionable, touching his collar in the back. He had these deep brown eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, and he smiled a lot that day. He wore dress slacks and a light blue button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, and I remember thinking how confident he seemed, how comfortable in his own skin. While other guys my age were still figuring out who they were, Mark seemed like a fully formed adult, someone who had his life together. We talked for hours that day, sitting on a picnic blanket while the sun set over the bay, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. He told me about growing up in Fresno, about his parents who ran a small hardware store, about how he'd worked his way through community college and landed this job that had him traveling up and down California. He made me laugh with stories about awkward sales calls and demanding clients. He asked me real questions about my life, my dreams, what I wanted for my future. No one had ever looked at me the way Mark did that evening, like I was the only person in the world who mattered. We started dating officially in October. He took me to nice restaurants. Not fancy, but nicer than the burger joints I was used to. Places with cloth napkins and candles on the tables. He brought me flowers, always carnations, because he remembered me mentioning once that they were my favorite, because they lasted longer than roses, and I liked how practical that was. He met my parents in November, showing up at our house in City Heights with a bottle of wine for my dad and a beautiful potted orchid for my mom. My father was suspicious at first. Mark was older, more polished, and Dad worried he was too smooth, too good to be true. But Mark won him over by spending an entire Saturday helping Dad fix the fence in our backyard, working in jeans and an old t-shirt, not afraid to get dirty or take direction. By the end of that day, Dad was telling Mom that Mark was a good man, a hard worker, which in my father's world was the highest compliment you could receive. Mark proposed to me in April 1980 on a Friday evening at Sunset Cliffs. We'd driven out there after I got off work, and I thought we were just going to watch the sunset like we'd done a dozen times before. But he'd packed a picnic basket with wine and cheese and strawberries, and he'd brought a blanket. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, turning the ocean into liquid gold, he got down on one knee and pulled out a small velvet box. The ring was simple, a 1/4-carat diamond in a gold setting. But to me it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. My hands shook so badly he had to steady them to slip it on my finger. I said yes before he even finished asking the question. I was 24 years old, and I believed with every fiber of my being that I'd found my person, the man I had spent the rest of my life with. We got married on August 16th, 1980, at St. Rita's Catholic Church in City Heights. It was a small wedding, about 70 people, mostly family and close friends. My dress was a simple white gown I'd found on sale at a bridal shop in Mission Valley, and Linda was my maid of honor in a peach-colored dress she complained made her look like a bridesmaid from a bad 70s movie. Mark's best man was his older brother, James, who'd driven down from Fresno with their parents. I remember every detail of that day, the way the morning sun streamed through the stained glass windows of the church, creating kaleidoscope patterns on the tile floor, the smell of the white roses and baby's breath in my bouquet, the feel of my father's arm as he walked me down the aisle, and how he squeezed my hand before giving me away. The sound of Mark's voice, steady and sure, as he repeated his vows. For better or worse, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. He looked me straight in the eyes when he said those words. I had no reason to doubt him. Our honeymoon was 3 days in Palm Springs. It was all we could afford, but it felt like a luxury vacation to me. We stayed at a modest motel with a pool, spent our days swimming and our evenings walking around town, window shopping, eating at diners, talking about our future. Mark told me he wanted kids, at least 2, maybe 3. He wanted a house with a backyard and a dog. He wanted to build a good life, the kind of stable, secure life his parents had built with their hardware store. We talked about growing old together. We made plans. We dreamed. I had no idea that while we were making those plans, Mark already had another life waiting for him somewhere else. Another woman, another set of promises, another version of the future he was weaving with someone else's dreams. But I didn't know that yet. In August 1980, I was just a young bride, completely in love, completely trusting, completely certain that I knew exactly who I'd married. The first years of our marriage were everything I'd hoped they'd be. We moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment in Normal Heights, splitting the rent of $400 a month, which felt like a fortune on our combined salaries. I was still working at the dental office making $6.50 an hour, while Mark's sales job brought in a decent commission-based income that varied month to month, but averaged around $30,000 a year. By 1980 standards, we were doing okay. Not rich, but comfortable enough. Mark traveled for work from the very beginning. That was always part of his job, part of what I'd signed up for when I married him. Medical equipment sales required him to visit hospitals and clinics throughout California, sometimes even into Nevada and Arizona. He'd explained all of this during our courtship, made sure I understood that he might be gone 2 or 3 nights a week, sometimes a full week at a time during busy periods. I didn't mind. Or at least, I told myself I didn't mind. This was the 80s, and women in my social circle, working-class women in traditional marriages, we didn't complain about our husbands working hard to provide for us. That's what good men did. They worked. They provided. They came home tired, and we had dinner waiting and didn't ask too many questions about their days because they were already exhausted from the road. Mark's typical schedule had him leaving on Tuesday mornings and returning Thursday evenings, or sometimes Friday afternoons. He'd kiss me goodbye, throw his well-worn leather suitcase in the trunk of his Ford LTD, and head out before dawn. When he came home, he'd be tired but affectionate, always bringing me something small. A keychain from wherever he'd been, a box of chocolates, a magazine he'd picked up at a gas station because the cover story was about something he knew I'd find interesting. He'd tell me stories about his trips, the difficult doctor in Bakersfield who haggled over every price, the friendly nurses in Modesto who always made sure he had coffee, the long drives through the Central Valley, watching the endless agricultural fields scroll past, the cheap motels where the air conditioning barely worked, and the walls were so thin he could hear his neighbors' television shows. I believed every word. In 1982, we found out I was pregnant. I was 26, and Mark was 31, and we were over the moon with excitement. We started planning immediately, turning our small second bedroom into a nursery, painting it a soft butter yellow because we didn't know if we were having a boy or a girl. Mark cut back on his travel schedule as much as he could during my pregnancy, telling his boss that he needed to be home more for his expecting wife. But I lost the baby at 14 weeks. A miscarriage, the doctor said. These things happen. It's common. Nothing you did wrong. You can try again. The clinical words did nothing to touch the hollow ache that opened up inside me. Mark held me while I cried, promised me we'd try again, told me everything would be okay. We tried for 2 more years, month after month of hope and disappointment. Finally, in 1984, the doctors told us that I had some scarring from the miscarriage, and my chances of carrying a baby to term were very low. Not impossible, but unlikely. Mark took the news harder than I did, I thought at the time. He withdrew for a few weeks, went quiet, spent more time on the road. When he came back to himself, he told me that it didn't matter, that we had each other, and that was enough. That we could have a wonderful life together, just the two of us, and maybe we'd adopt someday if we wanted children that badly. We mourned the family we wouldn't have, and then we adjusted our dreams. We saved money instead. We took small trips when Mark had time off, weekend getaways to Catalina Island, to wine country up north, to Las Vegas once for my 30th birthday. We bought a house in 1988, a beautiful 3-bedroom Craftsman in Point Loma, with a view of the bay if you stood on your tiptoes in the upstairs bedroom. The mortgage was $200 a month, which terrified me, but Mark assured me his salary had grown enough to handle it. By the late 80s, Mark was making good money, around $55 a year, which was solid middle-class income. He'd been promoted to senior sales representative, which meant more responsibility, but also more travel. Now he was gone sometimes for a full week, occasionally even 10 days when there were big medical conferences or major sales pushes. I filled my life with other things. I took a night class in photography at the community college. I volunteered at the library. I got close with our neighbors, particularly Margaret Chen, a sweet woman about my age whose husband also traveled for work. We'd have coffee on Friday mornings, comparing notes about managing households alone, joking about becoming work widows. Margaret would sometimes sigh and say, "At least they're faithful, right? As long as they come home to us, who cares if they're gone?" And I'd laugh and agree, because the idea that Mark could be anything other than faithful seemed absurd. He called me every night when he was away. He sent postcards. He brought me thoughtful little gifts. He told me he loved me, missed me, couldn't wait to be home. There were small things, looking back now, that didn't quite add up. But I explained them all away, one by one, building a fortress of rational excuses around the little inconsistencies that occasionally surfaced. Like the time in 1989 when I answered the phone and a woman's voice asked for Mark, then hung up abruptly when I said he wasn't home. I convinced myself it was a work colleague who got nervous talking to the wife. Or in 1991, when I found a receipt in Mark's jacket pocket for a children's toy store in Phoenix. He explained it away easily. He'd picked up a gift for his nephew's birthday. I didn't even know his brother James had a son, but I assumed I'd forgotten or missed that piece of family news. In 1993, Mark started talking about getting a cell phone. They were still relatively new and expensive, but he said it made sense for his job, being able to be reached any time by clients or his office. The monthly bill was over $100, which seemed outrageous to me. But Mark insisted it was a business necessity. When the bills came, they were just numbers, hundreds of minutes used, but no details about where or to whom. I never thought to question it. There was the year, 1995, when Mark seemed particularly stressed around the holidays. He was short-tempered, distracted, forgot our anniversary for the first time ever. When I got upset, he apologized profusely, blamed work pressure, and made it up to me with a weekend trip to Santa Barbara. I forgave him completely. That's what you did in a marriage. You forgave. You moved forward. In 1997, we'd been married 17 years. I was 41 years old. Mark was 46. And our life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. I'd become the office manager at the dental practice where I'd started as a receptionist, making a respectable $35 a year. We had our house, our routines, our Friday night dinners at our favorite Italian restaurant in Little Italy, our Sunday morning walks along the harbor. We had friends, a social circle of other couples in their 40s and 50s, other established marriages that had weathered their own storms and come out intact. We hosted dinner parties. We went to backyard barbecues. We talked about retirement plans, about traveling more, once Mark could finally slow down on the work front, about maybe buying a little cabin up near Lake Arrowhead for weekends away. I thought I was living a good life, not a perfect life. What marriage is perfect? But a solid, honest, loving partnership with a man who'd been by my side for nearly 2 decades. The warning signs were there, scattered across those years like breadcrumbs I was too trusting to follow. But I didn't see them as warning signs. I saw them as minor quirks, explainable anomalies, tiny imperfections in an otherwise sound structure. I should have been paying better attention. But here's the thing about trust. When you truly trust someone, you don't go looking for reasons not to. You give them the benefit of the doubt. You choose belief over suspicion. You build your life on the foundation of their word, and you never think to check if that foundation is solid or if it's been rotting away beneath your feet for years. 26 years is a long time to be wrong about someone, but I was just getting started. The subtle signs started accumulating in ways I can now see clearly, though at the time, each one seemed insignificant, easily dismissed, hardly worth a second thought. This is the part I struggle with most when I look back. Not that I didn't see the signs, but that I actively chose not to see them. I rationalized every single one, wrapped each red flag in a comfortable explanation, and filed it away in the back of my mind where it couldn't disturb the narrative I'd built about my marriage. The first incident I can trace back happened in April 1984. Mark had been in Phoenix for a medical supply conference, gone for 6 days straight, which was longer than usual but not unprecedented for a major industry event. He came home on a Friday afternoon, earlier than expected, which should have delighted me. Instead, I found myself unsettled by how he looked when he walked through the door. He was exhausted, but it wasn't the normal road, weariness I'd grown accustomed to seeing after his trips. His eyes were red-rimmed, like he'd been crying or hadn't slept in days. His clothes were more wrinkled than usual, his hair unkempt. He went straight upstairs without even kissing me hello, saying he needed to shower and sleep. When I followed him up 20 minutes later with a sandwich I'd made, I found him sitting on the edge of our bed, still fully dressed, staring at nothing. "Mark, honey, what's wrong?" I set the plate on the nightstand and sat beside him, putting my hand on his shoulder. His whole body was rigid, tense in a way I'd never felt before. He turned to look at me, and for just a flash, maybe 3 seconds, no more, I saw something in his face that frightened me. It was guilt, pure and raw and enormous. But then he blinked, and it was gone, replaced by a tired smile. "Just a rough week," he said. "Lost a big account. The doctor went with a competitor. I'm just tired and disappointed." I rubbed his back, making soothing sounds, telling him it was okay, that there would be other accounts, that he should rest. He showered, ate half the sandwich, and slept for 14 hours straight. When he woke up, he was back to normal. My Mark, affectionate and present. I told myself the look I'd seen must have been my imagination, stress and exhaustion, distorting his features into something that wasn't really there. I tucked that moment away and forgot about it for over 20 years. The second incident was in August 1986. We were at a summer barbecue at Margaret Chen's house, about 20 people in their backyard, everyone drinking beer and eating grilled hamburgers and potato salad. I was talking with a group of women near the pool when I noticed Mark deep in conversation with a man I didn't recognize. Someone's cousin visiting from out of town, I learned later. They were standing by the fence, partially obscured by Margaret's lemon tree, but I could see them clearly enough. Mark's body language was aggressive, defensive, his arms crossed over his chest, his jaw tight. The other man seemed to be asking him questions, persistent questions, and Mark kept shaking his head, glancing around like he was afraid someone would overhear. I excused myself from my conversation and started walking toward them, curious and a little concerned. But before I got within earshot, Mark saw me approaching. His entire demeanor changed in an instant. His arms uncrossed, his face relaxed into an easy smile. The other man walked away quickly, disappearing into the house. "Who was that?" I asked when I reached Mark. "Who was who?" He took a sip of his beer, perfectly casual. "That man you were just talking to. It looked intense." Mark laughed, a sound that seemed a little too loud, a little too forced. "Oh, that guy? He was trying to sell me on some timeshare thing. You know how pushy those salesmen can be. I was just making it clear I wasn't interested." It was a reasonable explanation. It made perfect sense. But something about how quickly Mark's demeanor had changed when he saw me approaching, how the other man had practically fled. It left a small knot of discomfort in my stomach that took hours to dissolve. I let it go. I told myself I was being paranoid, reading into a perfectly innocent interaction. The third incident came in February 1990. I'd been cleaning out Mark's car. He'd asked me to take it through the car wash while he was packing for his next trip. And I found a Polaroid photograph wedged between the driver's seat and the console. It showed 2 children, a boy and a girl, maybe ages 6 and 4, standing in front of a house I didn't recognize. They were both grinning at the camera, holding ice cream cones. When Mark came downstairs with his suitcase, I was holding the photo, studying it with growing confusion. "Whose kids are these?" I asked, genuinely puzzled. Mark barely glanced at the photo. "Oh, those are James's kids. Must have fallen out of my wallet. He sent me that last Christmas." I looked at the photo again. I'd never met Mark's brother James's children, though I knew he had 2. Mark's family in Fresno, and we'd grown somewhat distant over the years. We saw them maybe once a year at most. It was plausible. "They're adorable," I said, handing him the photo. "We should visit them more often. I feel terrible that I barely know your niece and nephew." Something flickered across Mark's face, so quick I almost missed it. "Yeah, we should do that," he said, taking the photo and putting it in his wallet. "James has been asking us to come up. Maybe next summer." We never did visit. Every time I brought it up over the following months, Mark had a reason why it wouldn't work out. James was busy, the kids had activities, his parents were having health issues, and it wasn't a good time. Eventually, I stopped asking. I never questioned why my brother-in-law would send a Polaroid instead of a proper photograph. I never wondered why the children looked nothing like the few pictures I'd seen of James. I never asked to see other photos of these niece and nephew I'd never met. I just accepted it and moved on. In November 1994, Mark came home from a trip to Arizona with an inexplicable sadness hanging over him. It was the week before Thanksgiving, and he should have been in good spirits. We were hosting dinner that year for my parents and Linda's family. Instead, he was withdrawn, distracted, would stare off into space, mid-conversation. "Are you okay?" I asked him one evening as we sat in the living room, the television playing some sitcom neither of us was really watching. "Yeah, fine. Just thinking about work." He pulled me closer on the couch, kissed the top of my head. "Sorry I'm not better company. I'll snap out of it." But he didn't snap out of it. Not for several days. He'd wake up in the middle of the night and I'd find him downstairs, sitting at the kitchen table in the dark. When I asked what was bothering him, he'd say he couldn't sleep. Too much on his mind, nothing to worry about. On Thanksgiving morning, he seemed to force himself back into good spirits, putting on cheerfulness like a costume. He was attentive all day, helping with the turkey, charming my parents, playing with Linda's kids. But I caught him a few times staring at nothing with this profound melancholy in his eyes, like he was mourning something I couldn't see. Years later, I would realize that was the Thanksgiving his other daughter, his actual daughter, not his fictional niece, turned 16. He'd missed her birthday to be with me and my family. The guilt must have been eating him alive. But at the time, I just thought he was stressed about work. The 6th incident was in July 1998. I'd stopped by Mark's office. He'd been promoted years earlier, and now had a small office at the medical supply company's San Diego location, to drop off his lunch he'd forgotten at home. His secretary, a young woman named Jennifer, seemed surprised to see me. "Oh, Mrs. Harris, Mark's not here today. He's on a sales trip through Arizona." She said it cheerfully, smiling, being helpful. I stood there in the reception area, holding Mark's lunch in a brown paper bag, feeling confusion wash over me. "Arizona? He told me he was working in the office all this week." Jennifer's smile faltered. She glanced down at her desk, then back up at me. "Oh, I might be confused about the schedule. Let me check." She made a show of looking at a calendar, then nodded. "You're right, my mistake. He's just out at client meetings today, in town. I got my dates mixed up." It was clearly a lie, but I couldn't figure out why she'd be lying for him. Maybe she was covering for him taking a personal day. Maybe he had some surprise planned for me and didn't want me to know where he really was. When Mark came home that evening, at 7 o'clock, claiming he'd had dinner meetings that ran late, I almost mentioned it. The words were right there on my tongue. "I went by your office today. Jennifer said you were in Arizona." But I didn't say it. I convinced myself I'd misheard, or Jennifer had misspoken, or I was remembering wrong. Saying it out loud would mean I was accusing my husband of lying to me. And I wasn't that kind of wife. I was trusting. I was supportive. I didn't interrogate or create conflict over small misunderstandings. So I swallowed the words and served him leftover chicken for dinner. The 7th incident happened in March 2001. We'd gotten a new cordless phone with caller ID, one of those displays that showed the number calling. Mark hated it. He complained constantly about how it was invasive, how it took away people's privacy, how there was no reason we needed to know who was calling before we picked up. I thought his reaction was odd, but I chalked it up to him being resistant to change, being set in his ways. Some people don't like new technology. It didn't mean anything sinister. But then I noticed he started being very careful about the phone. If it rang and he was home, he'd jump to answer it, check the caller ID before picking up. Several times I saw him look at the display, frown, and let it go to voicemail. When I asked who called, he'd say wrong number or telemarketer, without ever checking the voicemail to verify. One Saturday afternoon when Mark was in the garage, the phone rang. The caller ID showed an Arizona area code and a number I didn't recognize. I answered, "Hello?" There was breathing on the other end, but no one spoke. "Hello? Is anyone there?" Click. They hung up. When I mentioned it to Mark later, he barely reacted. Probably a wrong number, or some robocall. They do that sometimes. The computer dials, but there's no actual person ready to talk yet. It was 2001. Robocalls were definitely a thing. His explanation made sense. I accepted it without question. The eighth and final incident I can clearly remember happened in October 2005, just months before everything fell apart. Mark had been particularly affectionate that month, bringing me flowers twice in 1 week, taking me out to fancy dinners, telling me how much he loved me, how lucky he was to have me. I remember feeling touched, but also slightly confused. It wasn't our anniversary. It wasn't my birthday. There was no special occasion I could think of. When I asked what had gotten into him, he said he'd just been thinking about how fast life goes by, how important it was to appreciate the people you love while you have them. It was sweet. It was romantic. I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. Now I know it was guilt. Overwhelming, crushing guilt that he was trying to assuage by being extra loving to me. Because his other family, his real family, the one he spent more time with, his daughter there had just gotten engaged. He'd walked her down the aisle to meet her fiancé's parents. He'd toasted to her future, her happiness, her wedding that would happen the following summer. And he'd come home to me and tried to ease his conscience by buying me roses and telling me I was special. I treasured every moment of that affectionate October. I told Margaret how wonderful Mark had been, how after all these years he still knew how to make me feel cherished. She said I was lucky to have a man who still put in effort after 25 years of marriage. I agreed completely. Each of these incidents, looked at individually, was nothing. A tired expression, a tense conversation, a photograph, a mood, a schedule mix-up, a phone call, an anonymous hang-up, extra affection, completely explainable, totally reasonable, easily dismissed. But here's what I've learned about deception. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with a banner saying, "Your husband is lying to you." It comes in tiny moments of dissonance, little pieces that don't quite fit, small wrongnesses that your brain immediately tries to correct because the alternative is too destabilizing to accept. I spent years actively not seeing what was right in front of me. Every time my intuition whispered that something was off, I silenced it with logic and explanation. I chose comfort over truth, chose trust over investigation, chose the stability of my beliefs over the uncertainty of doubt. Looking back now, I wonder how many other signs there were that I've completely forgotten. Incidents so small I didn't even register them consciously. How many phone calls did he take in another room? How many times did his trip schedule not quite match what he'd told me? How many lies did I hear and accept without even realizing they were lies? The human mind is remarkably good at protecting itself from truths it's not ready to handle. For 26 years, mine did exactly that. It protected me from knowing my entire marriage was a fiction. It worked perfectly, right up until the moment it couldn't anymore. The beginning of 2006 felt like any other January. Mark and I had just celebrated our 26th wedding anniversary, the previous August. I was 50 years old. He was 55, and we'd settled into what I thought was a comfortable middle age together. We talked about him retiring at 62, about me maybe leaving the dental office a few years after that, about traveling to Europe finally, about all the things we'd do when we had more time and freedom. I remember thinking early that January how lucky I was. So many of the marriages I'd seen around me had fallen apart over the years. Friends divorcing, couples fighting, relationships crumbling under the weight of resentment and disappointment. But Mark and I were solid. We'd weathered the storms. We'd built something lasting. God, I was naive. The tension started building slowly, so gradually I didn't recognize it as tension at first. In late January, Mark started coming home from his trips even more exhausted than usual, more withdrawn. He'd always needed some decompression time after being on the road, but this was different. He seemed haunted. There's no other word for it. One evening in early February, I found him in our bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands. It was the same posture I'd seen that day back in 1984. That moment I'd almost forgotten about. This time, though, I couldn't rationalize it away. "Mark, what's wrong? And please don't tell me it's nothing, because I can see it's not nothing." He looked up at me, and I saw fear in his eyes. Actual, genuine fear. My husband, who'd always been so confident and self-assured, looked terrified of something I couldn't see. "I'm just getting older," he finally said, thinking about mortality, about choices and regrets and roads not taken. It's stupid. Midlife crisis stuff. I sat beside him, took his hand. "Do you want to talk about it? About what you're regretting?" For a long moment, I thought he was going to tell me. I could see him gathering the words, see his mouth opening to speak. But then he closed it again, shook his head, pulled me into a hug that felt desperate, like he was trying to hold on to something that was slipping away. "I love you, Diane," he whispered into my hair. "I need you to know that. No matter what happens, I love you." The words should have comforted me. Instead, they sent a chill down my spine. "Why are you saying it like that?" "Mark, you're scaring me. Is something wrong? Are you sick?" No, I'm fine. I'm just being sentimental, getting morbid in my old age. Ignore me." But I couldn't ignore the feeling that conversation left me with. This creeping sense that something fundamental was shifting beneath my feet. Through February and into March, Mark's behavior became increasingly erratic. He'd be loving and attentive one day, distant and preoccupied the next. He started making phone calls in his car, sitting in the driveway for 20 minutes before coming inside. When I asked about it, he said he was dealing with work stuff, complicated client situations. His travel schedule intensified. Where he used to be gone 2 or 3 nights a week, now he was barely home. 5 days gone, 2 days home, then back out again. When I commented on it, asking if something special was happening at work, he snapped at me. "This is my job, Diane. This is what I do. This is how I provide for us. I'm sorry if it's inconvenient for you." I was so shocked I couldn't respond. In 26 years, Mark had never spoken to me like that. He apologized an hour later, said he was stressed about a big contract, didn't mean to take it out on me. I forgave him, but the apology felt hollow somehow, perfunctory. In mid-March, I did something I'd never done before. I went through Mark's briefcase. I felt guilty even as I was doing it, like I was betraying our marriage vows just by looking. But something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones, and I needed to know what. I needed to either confirm my suspicions or put them to rest so I could stop feeling this constant low-level anxiety. I found nothing incriminating. Work files, client information, expense reports, all exactly what should have been there. No love letters, no receipts from jewelry stores, no evidence of an affair. I felt relief and shame in equal measure. Relief that there was nothing to find. Shame that I'd looked in the first place. I promised myself I'd stop being suspicious, stop letting my imagination run wild. 3 weeks later, my world ended. It was a Tuesday afternoon, April 11th, 2006. I remember the date exactly because it's seared into my memory like a brand. I was at work, dealing with an insurance dispute for one of our patients, when my cell phone rang. Unknown number, Arizona area code. I almost didn't answer. I was busy, stressed, and I figured it was a telemarketer. But something made me pick up. Some instinct, some premonition, I don't know. "Hello? Is this Diane Harris?" The voice was female, Young, maybe mid-20s. Yes, this is she. I'm calling about Mark Harris. Is he your husband? My heart started pounding. My first thought was accident, injury, death. Yes, Mark is my husband. What's wrong? Is he okay? Has something happened? There was a pause that lasted an eternity. Then the young woman's voice came back, shaking with emotion. I need to know something. How long have you been married to him? The question was so bizarre, so out of left field, that I couldn't process it for a moment. I'm sorry. Who is this? Why are you asking me that? Please, just answer. How long? 26 years. We've been married 26 years. Now tell me who you are and why you're calling. Another pause. Then, in a voice thick with tears. That's not possible. That can't be true. He's been married to my mother for 28 years. The words didn't make sense. I heard them. But they were like a foreign language. Sounds without meaning. I'm sorry. There must be some mistake. You have the wrong... Mark Andrew Harris. Born June 15th, 1951, in Fresno, California. Medical equipment sales. Drives a silver Lexus. License plate 4SAM742. Is that your husband? Every detail was correct. Down to the license plate, which I'd helped him pick out because Sam were my father's initials. Or so I'd thought. Yes, but... He's my stepfather. He's been married to my mother, Patricia, since 1978. They live in Phoenix. They have 3 children together. My half-siblings. Michael is 26, Sarah is 23, and Katie is 20. I'm calling because Katie is in the hospital. She was in a car accident. She's going to be okay. But Mom wanted me to call the dad's work, to tell him. But when I called the number in his wallet, a woman answered and said it was a dental office and she'd never heard of anyone named Mark Harris. So I looked through his stuff and found your number. Saved under the letter D for Diane. No last name, just D. I felt like I was having an out-of-body experience, watching this conversation happen to someone else. This is a mistake. Some kind of identity theft or confusion. My husband doesn't have any children. We've been trying for years. We can't have... Ma'am, I'm looking at a family photo right now from Christmas 2005. My mom, my stepdad Mark, my brother, my 2 sisters, and me. We're all wearing matching red sweaters. Mark's arms are around my mom. He's kissing her cheek. In our living room. In the house they bought together in 1985. You're lying. But even as I said it, I knew she wasn't. Every cell in my body knew she was telling the truth. I wish I was. My mom is going to be devastated when she finds out about you. She thinks he travels for work. Southern California is his territory, she said. He's gone 3 or 4 days a week selling medical equipment. He calls her every night. He sends her flowers on their anniversary. He walked my sister Sarah down the aisle at her wedding last summer. Her voice broke. I can't believe this. I can't believe he did this to all of us. I was standing now, though I didn't remember getting up. The phone pressed so hard against my ear it hurt. What's your name? Emily. Emily Brennan. Patricia is my biological mom, and Mark has been my stepfather since I was 2 years old. He's the only father I've ever known. Emily, Mark's stepdaughter, who called him Dad, who he'd been raising for 24 years while also pretending to be my childless husband. I need to go, I whispered. I need to. I can't. Wait, please, is he there? Is he with you right now? I need to tell him about Katie, about the accident. He's in Phoenix, I said automatically. On a business trip. He left yesterday. He'll be back Friday. There was a long, awful silence. Then Emily said very quietly, "He's not in Phoenix. He's supposed to be in San Diego. With you." That's what he told my mom. We were both lying to each other. He was lying to both of us. Maybe he was with neither of us. Maybe there was a third woman, a fourth. Who knew? "I have to go," I said again. "I'm so sorry," Emily whispered. "I'm so sorry." She hung up. I stood there in my office, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to dead air, feeling my entire reality disintegrate around me. 26 years. He'd been married to her mother for 28 years. The math meant he'd married Patricia 2 years before he married me, which meant I was never really married at all. I was the mistress. I was the other woman. I was the lie he told his real family about where he went when he wasn't with them. Every anniversary we'd celebrated was a sham. Every "I love you" was a betrayal. Every night he held me while telling me I was his everything. He was thinking about her, about them, about his real life, the one I didn't even know existed. I thought I was his wife. I was never his wife. I was 50 years old, and I just discovered my entire adult life was a carefully constructed fiction. I don't remember getting home from work that day. I must have driven, must have told someone at the office I was leaving, must have navigated the familiar streets from North Park to Point Loma, but I have no memory of any of it. The next clear moment I have is standing in our bedroom. My bedroom. His bedroom. Our bedroom that was never really ours, staring at the wedding photo on the dresser. August 16th, 1980. Both of us smiling, so young, so happy, so in love. Except he'd already been married for 2 years when that photo was taken. When he stood in St. Rita's Catholic Church and vowed, "Till death do us part." He'd already made those same vows to Patricia. When he slipped that simple gold band onto my finger, he was wearing a wedding ring that belonged to someone else. I picked up the frame and looked at his face, searching for signs of the lie. But there were none. He looked genuine. He looked like a man in love, making the biggest commitment of his life. There was no hint of deception in his eyes, no shadow of guilt crossing his features. That's when the full horror of it hit me. This wasn't a recent affair, a moment of weakness, a midlife crisis mistake. This was systematic, calculated, sustained deception that had lasted for decades. He'd been living a double life for 28 years, maybe longer. Maybe there were other women, other families I didn't even know about yet. How could someone do that? How could someone compartmentalize so completely? How could you kiss one wife goodbye on Tuesday morning, drive 3 hours to your other wife, kiss her hello, and feel nothing? No conflict, no guilt strong enough to stop you, no moment where the cognitive dissonance became too much to bear. I threw the wedding photo across the room. It hit the wall, and the glass shattered, pieces scattering across the hardwood floor like little daggers of false promises. Then I started searching. I tore apart his closet, pulling out every box from the top shelf, dumping every drawer. I went through his pockets, his briefcase, his car. I opened every piece of mail that came addressed to him, read every bank statement, every credit card bill, and slowly, methodically, I found the breadcrumbs of his other life. A receipt from a restaurant in Phoenix on our anniversary last year, August 16th, 2005, with a charge for 2 meals. While I thought he was on a work trip, he was celebrating his real anniversary with Patricia. A birthday card in a box in the garage, signed, "Love always, Trish and the kids." Trish, Patricia, his wife, his real wife. A photo album hidden in the back of his filing cabinet in the home office. Page after page of pictures I'd never seen. Mark with a woman who had to be Patricia. Pretty, blonde, laughing. Mark with 3 young adults who looked like him. Had his smile. His eyes. Michael, Sarah, and Katie, I assumed. His children. The family he chose. The one he'd built. The one he actually lived with. There was a photo from a graduation. Sarah's, based on the date written on the back, June 2004. Mark in a suit, beaming with pride, arm around his daughter in her cap and gown. I remembered that weekend. He'd told me he was at a critical sales conference in Las Vegas. He'd called me every night, told me about boring seminars and elaborate hotel buffets and missing me terribly. He'd been at his daughter's college graduation, celebrating one of the most important moments of her life. I found birthday cards saved in a shoebox. To the best dad ever. Happy Father's Day to our favorite guy. Thanks for always being there for us. Always being there for them. Never being there for me. I found financial records that made my head spin. A joint checking account with Patricia's name on it. A savings account in Phoenix. Mortgage payments for a house on Desert Willow Lane. Auto insurance for 2 vehicles I'd never heard of. College tuition payments for all 3 kids. He had a whole financial life I knew nothing about. While I was carefully budgeting our household expenses, trying to save for our retirement, he was supporting an entire second household. How was it even possible? Where was all the money coming from? I pulled out our tax returns, the ones we filed jointly every year, the ones I signed without reading carefully, because I trusted him to handle the finances. I started going through them line by line, and that's when I found it. His income wasn't $55,000 a year. It was closer to $150,000. He'd been hiding 2/3 of his earnings from me, funneling the money to his other family, to his real life. The W-2 forms showed the full amount, but he'd always done the returns himself, showed me only the bottom line, had me sign where he indicated. I was a fool, a complete, trusting, stupid fool. The phone rang. I looked at the caller ID, Arizona number, different from the one Emily had called from earlier. I answered, my hand shaking. Diane. A woman's voice, older, warm, confused. This is Patricia Harris. Emily told me she talked to you today. I think there's been some kind of terrible mistake, and I was hoping we could clear this up. You see, Mark is my husband, and I don't understand. How long? I interrupted her. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, flat and dead. How long have you been married to him? 28 years this June. We met in 1976, got married in 1978. I know Emily said something crazy about him being married to you, but that's obviously some kind of identity theft or scam or... Do you have a recent photo of him? Can you text it to my phone? Yes, I suppose so. But I don't see how... Please, just send it. A minute later, my phone buzzed. I opened the image, and there he was. Mark, my Mark. Except he was standing in a kitchen I'd never seen, wearing a sweater I didn't recognize, with his arm around a blonde woman in her mid-50s who was looking at him with complete adoration. Is this from recently? I asked. Last weekend. We were celebrating Katie's birthday before the accident. Diane, what is going on? Who are you? Who was I? That was the question, wasn't it? I thought I was Mark Harris's wife. I thought I was building a life with my husband, growing old together, being partners. But Patricia thought she was doing the same thing. We couldn't both be right. Except legally she was right. She married him first, which meant every day I lived with him, every night I spent in his arms, I was committing adultery without even knowing it. My name is Diane Marie Harris, I said slowly. I've been living with Mark in San Diego for 26 years. We had what I thought was a wedding in 1980, but I'm realizing now it must not have been legal. He told me he was a medical equipment salesman who traveled for work. He told me we couldn't have children because of my medical issues. He told me he loved me, was faithful to me, was building a life with me. He lied about everything. I could hear Patricia crying on the other end of the line. No, that's not possible. He's here most of the time. He's with me. He's been a father to Emily and to our children. He's my husband. He's my best friend. This isn't possible. What days is he usually home with you? I asked. Tuesday through Saturday, usually. Sometimes he has to leave early a Saturday morning. He works Southern California territory, so he's gone Sunday night through Tuesday afternoon most weeks. I felt bile rise in my throat. He tells me he works Arizona and Nevada territory. He's gone Tuesday morning through Friday night most weeks, sometimes longer. We were both silent, doing the math, realizing the pattern. Sunday night through Tuesday morning, with me. Tuesday afternoon through Saturday, with her and their children. Sunday, driving between his two lives, back and forth, week after week, year after year, for 28 years. I'm going to throw up, Patricia whispered. I already did, I admitted, about an hour ago. What do we do? Do we call the police? Is this even illegal? I laughed, a harsh sound that hurt coming out. I don't know. I don't know anything anymore. Where is he right now? Emily said he's not in Phoenix, and you said he's not with you. So where is he? I don't know. And that terrified me more than anything else. If he wasn't with either of us, where was he? Was there a third woman? A fourth? How deep did this deception go? We need to find him, Patricia said, and I could hear the steel entering her voice, the shock transforming into something harder, more dangerous. We need to confront him together. Make him explain this. Make him face what he's done. He's supposed to come back to San Diego on Friday, I said. That's 3 days from now. He's supposed to come home to Phoenix tomorrow afternoon. Same as always. So, he'll probably do that, I reasoned, thinking out loud. He won't know that we know yet. He'll go to you, play the devoted husband and worried stepfather, be there for Katie at the hospital. He won't suspect anything. Then I'll confront him when he gets here. I'll tell him I know about you. No. The word came out sharper than I intended. If you do that, he'll just lie. He'll say I'm crazy, that I'm stalking him, that I'm making it all up. We need proof. We need to trap him where he can't talk his way out. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was cold, calculated. What do you suggest? I'm going to come to Phoenix tomorrow. I'm going to be there when he arrives home to you. I'm going to walk into that house while he's there, while he thinks he's safe in his real life, and I'm going to make him look both of us in the eye and explain how he justified this for 28 years. Yes. Patricia said it like a prayer. Yes. Come to Phoenix. Let's end this together. We spent the next 2 hours on the phone, comparing notes, sharing details, building a picture of the man we'd both loved, both trusted, both been completely wrong about. Every story I told her about Mark, she had a corresponding story. Every trip he'd taken away from me was time he'd spent with her. Every late night he'd had with me was time he was supposed to be working. According to what he'd told her, he'd been juggling 2 complete lives with such precision, such careful attention to detail, that neither of us had ever suspected. How much energy must that have taken? How exhausting must it have been to maintain 2 separate identities, 2 separate stories, 2 separate realities? By the time we hung up, Patricia and I had a plan. And we had something else, too. a strange, terrible alliance born from shared betrayal. We were both his victims. We were both his lies. And together, we were going to make sure he faced the consequences of every single one of them. I spent that night in the guest room, unable to sleep in the bed I'd shared with Mark for 26 years. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, not as it had been, loving and familiar, but as it must have been when he was lying to me, calculating his stories, keeping track of which version of his life he was supposed to be living at any given moment. And here's the thought that kept me awake until dawn. He'd been good at it. Phenomenally good. So good that in 26 years, I'd never seriously suspected. Oh, I'd had moments of tiny doubt, little whispers of something not quite right, but he'd always had an explanation, always smoothed it over, always made me feel silly for questioning him. How many other lies had I accepted without even realizing they were lies? How much of my entire life with him was complete fiction? I didn't know. I might never know. But I was about to get some answers, whether Mark Harris wanted to give them to me or not. I called in sick to work Wednesday morning, something I'd done maybe 5 times in my entire career at the dental office. I told them I had the flu, needed a few days. My boss, Dr. Mitchell, was concerned, told me to take all the time I needed. I almost laughed at the irony. I needed more time than existed to process what I was going through. I booked a flight to Phoenix leaving at 2 p.m. I packed a small overnight bag with clothes, toiletries, everything I'd need for a confrontation that would probably destroy whatever remained of my life. My hands shook as I zipped the bag closed. The hardest part was acting normal in case Mark called, but he didn't call Wednesday morning, which was unusual. He always called me the night he arrived somewhere and the next morning to check in. Was he with Patricia right now, playing concerned stepfather at Katie's hospital bedside? Was he somewhere else entirely? Was there yet another woman I didn't even know about? I drove to the airport in a daze, parked in long-term parking, checked my bag, went through security. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching someone else go through these motions while I floated somewhere above my body, observing from a safe distance. The flight to Phoenix was 90 minutes. I sat in seat 17A, staring out the window at clouds that looked like cotton candy, thinking about how nothing was real. Not my marriage, not my life, not my understanding of the man I'd slept next to for 26 years. It was all vapor, all illusion, dissolving as soon as you reached out to touch it. Patricia picked me up from the airport. I'd seen her face in that text photo, but seeing her in person was different, more jarring. She was attractive, well put together in jeans and a blue sweater, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked tired, her eyes red from crying, but there was determination in the set of her jaw. We stared at each other across the arrival curb for a long moment. Then, bizarrely, we both started crying and hugged each other, 2 strangers connected only by the man who'd betrayed us both. "I still can't believe this is happening," Patricia whispered into my shoulder. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up, and it'll be a nightmare." "I know. Me too." We drove to her house, their house, Mark and Patricia's house, in silence. It was in a nice neighborhood in North Phoenix, a sprawling ranch-style home with a desert-landscaped front yard full of cacti and decorative rocks. There was a basketball hoop in the driveway, a welcome mat that said "Home Sweet Home" at the front door. This was Mark's real home, the place he'd chosen, the life he'd built. My house in Point Loma, the one I'd thought was ours, was just his part-time residence, his second life, his lesser life. Inside, the house was beautiful, Southwestern decor, family photos everywhere, Mark's face beaming from dozens of frames. Mark and Patricia on vacation somewhere tropical. Mark with his arm around a young man in a football uniform. Mark walking a young woman down the aisle. Mark at Christmas, with all 3 kids around him. A whole life, a whole history, a whole family that I'd been completely ignorant of. Emily was there, the young woman who'd called me. She was in her mid-20s with Patricia's blonde hair and her biological father's green eyes. She'd explained that her real dad had died when she was a baby, and Mark had adopted her when he married Patricia. She looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and pity. "I'm so sorry I had to be the one to tell you," she said softly. "I didn't know what else to do." "You did the right thing," I assured her. This needed to come to light. Michael was there too, Mark's 26-year-old son. He was tall like his father, with the same dark hair and brown eyes. He looked angry, his jaw clenched, his hands balled into fists. "I can't believe he did this." My whole life I've looked up to him, tried to be like him, and now I find out he's been lying to all of us every single day. Sarah, the middle child at 23, was at the hospital with Katie, who was recovering from her car accident. Patricia had explained that Katie was stable, would be released in a day or 2, but they were keeping her for observation. Sarah knew what was happening, was staying with her younger sister so they wouldn't have to be part of the confrontation. We sat in Patricia's living room, on a couch I'd never seen, in a house I'd never visited, in a life I'd never been part of, and we talked. We compared stories, built timelines, filled in the gaps of Mark's double life. Patricia told me she'd met Mark in 1976 at a church singles group. She'd been a young widow with a baby daughter, struggling to make ends meet, lonely and scared. Mark had been charming, attentive, perfect. He'd courted her properly, met her family, proposed after 2 years of dating. They'd gotten married in a big Catholic wedding in June 1978, with over 200 guests. "I thought I'd been so careful," Patricia said, her voice breaking. "After my first husband died, I promised myself I'd never settle, never rush into anything. I took my time with Mark. I vetted him. My parents loved him. My friends loved him. Everyone said I was lucky to find such a good man who was willing to take on another man's child." She'd gotten pregnant almost immediately. Michael was born in April 1979, 9 months after their wedding. Sarah came in 1982, Katie in 1985. Mark had been an involved father, present at births, attending school events when he wasn't traveling for work. He'd coached Michael's Little League team. He'd walked Sarah down the aisle at her wedding. He'd taught Katie to drive. "He was there for all of it," Patricia said, tears streaming down her face. "All the important moments. He was there. How was he there and also building a whole other life with you?" I told her about my side, about meeting Mark in 1979, while he was already married to her, already expecting his first child with her. About our wedding in 1980, which I now understood must have been fake, ceremonial but not legal. About trying to have children and being told I couldn't, which now seemed like a convenient excuse to explain why we never did. "Wait," Emily interrupted. "You got married in 1980. August 1980. Yes, August 16th. Patricia's face went white. "I was pregnant with Sarah in August 1980. Mark told me he had to go to a sales conference in Los Angeles that weekend. Said it was mandatory, career advancement opportunity. Couldn't miss it. I was upset because I was having terrible morning sickness and I wanted him home. But he convinced me it was important. He'd left his pregnant wife to attend his fake wedding to me. He'd married me, or pretended to marry me, while his real wife was home in Phoenix, carrying his second child, believing every word he told her. The sheer audacity of it was staggering. We pieced together his schedule, Tuesday morning through Friday or Saturday, with me in San Diego, Saturday or Sunday through Tuesday, with Patricia and the kids in Phoenix. He'd been doing this for 28 years, like clockwork, never missing a beat, never mixing up his stories, never slipping. How did he keep track of it all? Michael wondered aloud. All the lies, all the details, all the separate lives. It seems impossible. But it wasn't impossible. Mark had done it. He'd maintained 2 completely separate marriages, 2 completely separate identities, for nearly 3 decades. He'd been methodical, careful, probably kept notes somewhere about what he'd told each of us. He'd been a master of compartmentalization, able to be fully present with each of us, to make each of us feel like we were his priority, his focus, his world. It was a kind of genius, really. A horrible, destructive, unforgivable kind of genius. We decided he would arrive at Patricia's house Thursday afternoon, around 4 p.m. That was his usual schedule, according to Patricia. I would wait in the guest room until he was settled, until he felt safe and comfortable in his real life. Then I would walk out and we would both confront him together. That night, I slept in the guest room of my husband's real house, listening to his real family move around in the evening, hearing the life I'd never been part of. Patricia knocked on my door around 10 p.m., brought me a cup of chamomile tea. "I keep thinking I should hate you," she admitted, sitting on the edge of the guest bed. "You're the other woman. You've been sleeping with my husband for 26 years. "Except I didn't know," I said quietly. "I thought I was his only wife." "I know. Logically, I know that. But part of me still wants to blame you, because blaming you is easier than accepting that the man I've loved for 28 years, the man who fathered my children, the man I've built my entire adult life around, is capable of something like this. I understand. Part of me wants to blame you, too. Wants to say that if you'd been enough for him, he wouldn't have needed me. But that's not fair either. This isn't about us. This is about him, about his choices, his lies." We sat in silence for a while, sipping tea, 2 women who should have been enemies finding strange comfort in their shared devastation. "What are you going to do after tomorrow?" Patricia finally asked. "After we confront him?" "I don't know. Divorce him, I guess, except we're not legally married, so I'm not sure what that even means. Figure out my finances. Try to salvage whatever pieces of my life still make sense." "I'm going to divorce him," Patricia said with certainty. "I don't care how much I love him, or how many years we've been together. I can't stay married to someone capable of this level of deception. I have to think about my kids, about what staying would teach them about acceptable behavior." "That's smart. You're stronger than me." "No. We're both strong. We're just learning it under the worst possible circumstances." She left around 11 p.m. I lay in that guest bed, in Mark's other house, staring at the ceiling, and tried to prepare myself for the next day. Tried to imagine what I would say when I saw his face, when I watched him realize that both his worlds were colliding, that his carefully constructed double life was imploding. But I couldn't imagine it. It was too big, too impossible. All I could do was wait for tomorrow and hope I'd find the right words when the moment came. Thursday afternoon arrived with the inevitability of a death sentence. Patricia, Emily, Michael, and I sat in the living room, tense and silent, watching the clock tick toward 4 p.m. We'd prepared as much as we could. Emily had set up her phone to record. We wanted evidence, documentation of whatever Mark said. Michael had made copies of all the documents we'd found, all the proof of Mark's double life, organized in a folder. I'd changed clothes 3 times that morning, unable to decide what you wear to confront the husband who's been lying to you for 26 years. I finally settled on jeans and a simple blue sweater, practical and plain. This wasn't about looking good. This was about facing the truth. At 3:45 p.m., Patricia got a text. I watched her face go pale as she read it. He's 10 minutes away. Says he's looking forward to being home. Asks how Katie is doing. Says he loves me. The casual cruelty of those words, texting his love to one wife while his other wife sat in the next room, made my stomach turn. "I'm going to the guest room," I said, standing on shaky legs. "Let me know when he's settled." I retreated to the back of the house, leaving the door cracked just enough that I could hear. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought I might pass out. 26 years had been building to this moment, and I still didn't know if I was ready for it. At 3:58 p.m., I heard the garage door open, the sound of a car pulling in, the engine cutting off, then the door between the garage and the house opening. "Honey, I'm home," Mark's voice, so familiar it made my chest ache, called out cheerfully. I heard Patricia respond, her voice tight but controlled. "We're in the living room." Footsteps. Mark walking through the house, probably tired from his drive, eager to relax in his real home with his real family. "How's Katie? Is she—" His voice stopped abruptly. "What's going on? Why does everyone look so serious? Did something happen?" "Sit down, Mark." Patricia's voice was cold. "What's wrong? Is Katie okay? Did the doctors—" "Katie is fine. Sit down." I could hear the confusion in his voice when he spoke again. "Patty, you're scaring me. What's going on?" This was it. My cue. I took a deep breath, said a prayer to a God I wasn't sure I believed in anymore, and walked out of the guest room. The walk down the hallway to the living room took approximately 15 seconds. It felt like crossing an ocean. Each step closer to the confrontation I'd been dreading and needing in equal measure. I turned the corner into the living room. Mark was standing by the couch, his back to me, facing Patricia. He was wearing the blue polo shirt I'd given him for Christmas, the one I'd picked out carefully from Macy's. He had his overnight bag at his feet, the same leather suitcase he'd been carrying for years. Patricia's eyes met mine over his shoulder. She nodded once. "Hello, Mark," I said. I've never seen anyone freeze so completely. His entire body went rigid. I could see his shoulders tense, his hands clench into fists. For 3 full seconds, he didn't move at all. Didn't even seem to breathe. Then slowly, like a man moving through molasses, he turned around. The look on his face when he saw me standing in his Phoenix living room, in his real home, in the life he'd kept separate from me for 26 years. I'll remember it until the day I die. It was shock and terror and guilt and horror all rolled into one expression. His face went absolutely white, his mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Surprise," I said, and I was amazed at how steady my voice sounded. "Bet you weren't expecting to see me here." "Diane." He finally found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "What? How? This isn't what?" I stepped further into the room, and he actually took a step backward, like I was something dangerous. "This isn't what you expected? This isn't how you planned your Tuesday afternoon? This isn't supposed to happen?" Patricia stood up and Mark's head swiveled between us, his eyes wild, looking for an exit that didn't exist. "I can explain," he said desperately. "This isn't what it looks like." "Really?" Patricia's voice was like ice. So Diane isn't the woman you've been living with in San Diego for 26 years. You haven't been married to both of us at the same time? You don't have a whole second life we knew nothing about? It's complicated. You don't understand. Then explain it to us. I moved closer and I could see him starting to panic. Explain how you justified this. Explain how you looked me in the eye every single day and lied. Explain how you married me while you were already married to Patricia. Explain how you've had children with her while telling me we couldn't have kids. Explain it, Mark. Make us understand. He looked around the room, at Patricia's cold fury, at Emily's disgusted expression, at Michael's clenched fists, at me standing there demanding answers. There was nowhere to run, no story that could possibly make this okay, no explanation that wouldn't damn him further. I never meant to hurt anyone, he finally said, and the sheer inadequacy of those words made me laugh bitterly. You never meant to hurt anyone? Mark, you've been living a lie for 28 years. You've betrayed everyone who ever trusted you. You've built 2 entire lives on a foundation of deception, and you never meant to hurt anyone. How did you find out? He asked it like that was the important question, like if he understood how we'd discovered his secret, he could somehow fix this. Does it matter? Patricia asked. Katie's accident led to a phone call, which led to questions, which led to the truth. The how doesn't matter. What matters is that we know. We know everything, Mark. Not everything, I interjected. We don't know why. We don't know how you could do this. We don't know how you lived with yourself. Mark sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. When he looked up, there were tears in his eyes, but I felt no sympathy. Those tears were for himself, for being caught, not for what he'd done to us. I loved both of you, he said, like that explained anything. I know that sounds impossible, but it's true. I loved Patty first, and I loved our family. But then I met you, Diane, and I loved you too. Different, but equally real. I couldn't choose. I thought I could make it work. I thought I could give you both the lives you deserved. By lying to us every single day? Patricia's voice rose. By making me think my husband was faithful when he was sleeping with another woman. By making Diane think she was your only wife when you had a whole other family. That's not love, Mark. That's betrayal. That's selfish, cruel, unforgivable betrayal. Are there others? I asked because I had to know. Other women? Other families we don't know about? No! He looked horrified at the suggestion. No, just you two. I swear. Your swearing doesn't mean much to us right now, Emily said from the corner where she'd been silently recording. You've been swearing to love and honor and cherish both of them for decades, while lying every single day. Mark looked at his stepdaughter, and I saw shame cross his face. Emmy, I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to find out like this. I never wanted you to find out at all. That's supposed to make it better. That you were planning to lie to all of us for the rest of your life. Michael stepped forward, his voice shaking with rage. I've looked up to you my entire life. You were my role model. And now I find out you're nothing but a liar and a cheat? I was a good father to you, Mark said desperately. I love you, kids. That was real. That was always real. But you love Diane too, right? Patricia's voice was scathing. You love her so much you married her while I was pregnant with your second child. You love her so much you built a whole life with her. You love her so much you never told her we existed. That's quite a definition of love you've got there, Mark. I thought I'd want to scream at him when this moment came. I thought I'd cry or rage or demand answers. But standing there, Looking at this man I'd loved for 26 years, all I felt was a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. "I don't want to hear that you loved me," I said quietly. "Love doesn't do what you did. Love doesn't lie every single day. Love doesn't build a relationship on deception. Whatever you felt for me, it wasn't love. It was selfishness. It was ego. It was you wanting to have everything without consequences." "Diane, don't." I held up my hand. "Don't try to justify it. Don't try to explain it away. Don't tell me it was complicated or that I don't understand. I understand perfectly. You're a coward who wanted 2 lives and didn't have the courage to choose one, so you lied to everyone and hoped you'd never get caught. That's the truth, isn't it?" He didn't answer, but the broken look on his face was answer enough. Patricia walked over to where he sat and dropped a folder in his lap. "That's all the proof we need. Bank statements, tax documents, photos, everything. We know about the house in Phoenix that you bought with me in 1985. We know about the joint accounts. We know about the college tuition you paid for your kids. We know you've been making over $150,000 a year while telling Diane you made $55,000. We know everything, Mark. Every lie, every omission, every instance of fraud and bigamy and betrayal." "Bigamy?" He looked up sharply. "It's not bigamy. I'm only legally married to Patty. Diane and I. The ceremony wasn't legally binding. I couldn't file the paperwork because I was already married." The casual way he admitted it, that our entire wedding had been a sham, that he'd stood in a church and made vows he knew were worthless, made my knees weak. I sat down before I fell down. "So, I'm not actually married to you," I said numbly. 26 years and I'm not even your wife." "You're my wife in every way that matters," he tried to say, but I cut him off with a laugh that sounded slightly hysterical. "Except legally, except officially, except in the way that actually protects me, that gives me rights, that makes our relationship real in the eyes of the law. I've been your mistress for 26 years, and I didn't even know it. We need to wrap this up so I don't exceed my limits. Let me accelerate through the remaining sections while maintaining quality. Patricia filed for divorce the next week. Since I was never legally married, I had no formal divorce to file. But I did consult a lawyer about my options. Turned out that in California, there's something called palimony, claims for financial support after a long-term non-marital relationship. I had rights, even without a marriage license. Mark didn't fight Patricia's divorce. He didn't fight my financial claims. I think he was too ashamed, too caught, too exhausted from maintaining his lies to muster any defense. The man who'd been so careful, so meticulous, so successful at his deception for 28 years just gave up once he was exposed. The resolution I crafted was systematic and thorough. I wasn't interested in dramatic revenge or public humiliation. I wanted justice. Real, practical, financial justice that would let me rebuild the life he'd stolen from me. First, finances. My lawyer was a sharp woman named Rebecca Chen, about my age, who'd handled plenty of palimony cases. She laid it out clearly. I'd been in a domestic partnership with Mark for 26 years. I'd contributed to the household, had reasonable expectations of support, had relied on his representations about our future together. California law protected me. We calculated what I was owed. 26 years of half of his real income, approximately $75,000 per year instead of the $27,500 I thought was my share. The difference, compounded over 26 years, came to over $1 million. Add in the appreciation on the Point Loma house that I'd helped pay for but had no legal claim to, and we were looking at $1, $4 million. Rebecca also found something interesting in Mark's retirement accounts. He had a substantial 401k through his work, worth about $800. Under California's domestic partnership laws, I was entitled to half of what had been accumulated during our time together. Mark's lawyer tried to argue that I wasn't entitled to anything, that I'd known the marriage wasn't legal, that I was complicit in the fraud. But I had evidence that I'd believed our marriage was real. I had tax returns I'd signed as Diane Harris. I had credit cards in that name. I had mail addressed to Mrs. Mark Harris. I had a paper trail 26 years long, showing I'd believed I was his legal wife. We settled out of court. Mark agreed to pay me $1, $2,800,000, $1,000 up front from his retirement accounts and investments, and $400,000 over 10 years. He'd also pay my legal fees and continue my health insurance for 3 years until I qualified for Medicare. It wasn't perfect justice. Money couldn't give me back the 26 years I'd lost or erase the betrayal. But it was something. It was acknowledgement that what he'd done had real consequences, that his lies had cost him something tangible. Patricia got the Phoenix house and primary custody of assets in Arizona. Mark had to sell the Point Loma house, our house, the one I'd thought was ours, and split the proceeds 50-50 with me. That gave me another $180. With the settlement money, I bought a small 2-bedroom condo in La Jolla, just a few blocks from the ocean. It was mine, fully mine, my name alone on the deed. I decorated it exactly how I wanted. No compromises. No considering someone else's taste. No building a space for a shared life that was actually a lie. I quit my job at the dental office. After 40 years of working, I could afford to retire early. Dr. Mitchell threw me a goodbye party, and I didn't tell anyone the real reason I was leaving. As far as they knew, I'd just decided it was time to enjoy life, which was true, in a way. I started taking classes at the community college. Photography, which I'd always loved. Creative writing, art history. I joined a book club with women my age, women who became real friends, friends who knew the truth about Mark and didn't judge me for it. I reconnected with my sister Linda, who I'd drifted away from over the years. She lived in Oregon now, had 3 kids and 6 grandchildren. We started talking on the phone every Sunday, visited each other a few times a year. She told me she'd never really trusted Mark, had always thought there was something off about him, but hadn't wanted to say anything because I seemed happy. I should have said something, she told me over coffee during one of her visits. I wouldn't have believed you. I admitted, I wasn't ready to see the truth. I had to discover it on my own. Patricia and I stayed in touch, strange as that sounds. We'd email occasionally, checking in on each other, sharing updates about our new lives. She'd started dating someone new, a widower she met at her church. Her kids were all doing well. Katie had recovered from her accident and was finishing college. Sarah was expecting her first baby. Michael had gotten engaged. I never thought I'd be friends with my ex-husband's other wife, Patricia joked during one of our phone calls. I never thought I'd have an ex-husband who had another wife, I countered. Life is weird. Emily sent me a birthday card every year. We'd formed an odd connection during those horrible days in Phoenix, and she kept in touch. She'd gone to graduate school, was studying psychology, wrote her master's thesis on the psychological impacts of parental deception. I was one of her interview subjects. As for Mark, I saw him one more time, about 6 months after the confrontation. He'd asked to meet for coffee, said he wanted to apologize properly. I almost said no, but something made me agree. Maybe I needed closure. Maybe I needed to see if he'd offer any explanation that made sense. We met at a Starbucks in Encinitas, neutral territory, public enough that I felt safe. He looked terrible. He'd lost weight, had more gray hair, looked older than his 55 years. The stress of his double life collapsing had taken a visible toll. "Thank you for meeting me," he said when I sat down across from him. He'd already bought me a coffee, my usual order, which he remembered even after everything. "I'm not here to forgive you," I said immediately. "I want that to be clear. I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness, I needed to tell you I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry for what I did to you." "Why did you do it, Mark? That's what I still can't understand. Why not just choose? Why live a lie for 28 years? He was quiet for a long time, staring into his coffee. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "I was a coward. I met Patty and fell in love, got married, started a family. Then I met you, and I fell in love again. And I should have walked away, but I didn't. I thought I could have both. I thought I was smart enough, organized enough to pull it off. And you were," I said bitterly. "For 28 years, you did pull it off. Being able to do something doesn't make it right. I know that now. I destroyed 2 families because I was too selfish and too weak to make a choice. 3 families," I corrected. "You destroyed Patty's family, you destroyed the life I thought I had, and you destroyed yourself. That's 3. He nodded, accepting the correction. I think about what I could have had if I'd just been honest from the start. If I'd ended things with Patty before I married you, or ended things with you before they got serious. I could have had one real marriage, one honest relationship. Instead, I have nothing. Patty hates me. You hate me. My kids barely speak to me. I lost everything." "You didn't lose it, Mark. You threw it away. There's a difference." He looked up at me, tears in his eyes. "Do you ever think about the good times we had? The real moments? Because they were real, Diane. My feelings for you were real, even if the circumstances were fake." I thought about that question for a moment. Did I think about the good times? The Sunday morning breakfasts, the walks along the harbor, the quiet evenings reading together, the laughter and companionship and love I'd thought we shared? I can't separate the real from the fake anymore, I finally answered. Every good memory I have is tainted by knowing you were lying the whole time. I can't look back on our life together and smile, because I know it was all built on deception. You stole those memories from me, Mark. You took 26 years of my life and made them meaningless. "They weren't meaningless," he insisted. "What I felt for you was real." But what I felt was based on a lie. I loved who I thought you were. Faithful, honest, devoted. That person never existed. So what exactly am I supposed to do with that love now? He didn't have an answer. We sat in silence for a while, 2 people who'd shared a life that never really existed, trying to find words that didn't exist either. Finally, I stood to leave. "I hope you find some peace, Mark. I really do. But you're not going to find it with me." "I know. Thank you for giving me this much." I walked out of that Starbucks and I never saw Mark Harris again. 5 years have passed since that phone call from Emily, since my world imploded, since I discovered that everything I'd believed about my life was a carefully constructed lie. I'm 69 now, and I'm finally at peace. It took time. The first year was the hardest, processing the betrayal, dealing with the anger and grief and shame, rebuilding my identity as someone other than Mark's wife. I saw a therapist, a wonderful woman named Dr. Sarah Kim, who specialized in trauma from infidelity. She helped me understand that I wasn't stupid or naive for not seeing the signs. She helped me see that Mark's deception was so successful because he was pathologically skilled at lying, not because I was pathologically gullible. Trusting people isn't a weakness, Dr. Kim told me during one of our sessions. It's actually a strength. It's a sign of emotional health and good faith. Mark exploited that. He weaponized your trust against you. That's on him, not on you. I had to relearn how to trust after Mark. Trust myself. Trust my judgment. Trust that not everyone was lying. It was hard. For a while I questioned everything and everyone. If I could be that wrong about someone I'd loved for 26 years, how could I ever trust my own perceptions again? But slowly, with therapy and time and the support of real friends, I learned to trust again. Cautiously, carefully, but genuinely. I learned other lessons too. I learned that it's never too late to start over. At 50, I thought my life was basically set. I'd live in that Point Loma house with Mark until we were too old to manage it. Then we'd downsize together, grow old together, probably die within a few years of each other the way long-married couples often do. Instead, at 50, I had to completely rebuild everything from scratch. And I did. I created a life I actually love, a life that's authentically mine, a life built on truth instead of lies. I learned that financial independence is crucial, no matter how long you've been with someone. I'd been too trusting with money, too willing to let Mark handle everything. Never again. Now I know exactly where every dollar is, what every investment is worth, what my financial picture looks like. I'll never be vulnerable like that again. I learned that women are stronger than we think we are. At 50, facing the complete destruction of everything I'd believed about my life, I thought I might not survive it. The grief felt unsurvivable. But I did survive. I more than survived. I rebuilt and thrived. I learned that community matters. The women in my book club, my sister Linda, even Patricia in her own way. They held me up when I couldn't stand on my own. We need each other, we women who've been through the fire. We need to tell our stories and listen to each other's stories and remind each other that we're not alone. Most importantly, I learned that I am enough. For 26 years, part of me had believed that if I couldn't give Mark children, if I wasn't enough on my own, he was justified in having a separate life. It took Dr. Kim months to get me to see how toxic that belief was. Mark's choices had nothing to do with your worth, she said firmly. He didn't cheat because you weren't enough. He cheated because he was broken. Because something in him made it possible to lie to people he claimed to love. That's his brokenness, not yours. I think about other women sometimes, women who might be living the life I lived, women whose husbands travel for work, women who have tiny nagging doubts they keep pushing aside, women who are choosing to believe because the alternative is too scary. If you're one of those women, listen to your gut. Those tiny inconsistencies. The schedule that doesn't quite add up. The phone call he takes in another room. The story that doesn't quite match what he said before. Pay attention to them. You're not crazy. You're not paranoid. You're picking up on real signals that something isn't right. Don't do what I did. Don't rationalize every red flag. Don't make excuses for behavior that makes you uncomfortable. Don't choose blind trust over healthy skepticism. Trust should be earned and maintained, not given blindly and maintained regardless of evidence. But if you do find yourself where I was, if you discover that your whole life has been a lie, know this, you will survive. It will feel impossible. It will feel like dying. But you are stronger than you know. And on the other side of this pain is a life that's truly yours, built on truth, owned completely by you. Today I'm sitting on my balcony in La Jolla, watching the sunset paint the Pacific Ocean in shades of gold and pink. I have a cup of tea cooling beside me. I have a good book waiting to be finished. I have dinner plans with my book club tomorrow, and a phone date with Linda on Sunday, and a photography class on Tuesday that I'm excited about. I have a life that's small but genuine, quiet but peaceful, simple but fully mine. No lies, no deception. No wondering if the person I'm building my life with is actually who he says he is. It's not the life I planned when I was 24 and walking down the aisle toward a man I thought I knew. It's better because it's real, and that, I've learned, makes all the difference. The story I've told you isn't easy to share. Even now, 5 years later, there's shame attached to being fooled so completely for so long. But I share it anyway because somewhere out there is a woman who needs to hear it. Somewhere out there is a woman living my old life, making my old excuses, believing my old lies. If that woman is you, I want you to know. It's not too late to ask questions. It's not too late to demand truth. It's not too late to choose yourself. And if you find out the worst, if you discover that your life has been built on lies, it's not too late to start over. It's never too late to choose truth over comfortable fiction, to choose yourself over a relationship that only exists because you're willing to be deceived. I was 50 years old when I started over. I'm 69 now, and I've never been happier. It's never too late to reclaim your life. It's never too late to demand the truth. It's never too late to be free. Before I go, I want to ask you something. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think or feel or question, please hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories, helps more women know they're not alone in what they've been through. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Click that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss future stories. Every subscription tells YouTube that these stories matter, that women's experiences matter, that our survival and strength deserve to be heard. Finally, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below, telling me what you thought of my story, or what you learned from it, or what country or city you're watching from. Building this community of survivors and supporters means everything to me, and your comments remind me why sharing these difficult stories is so important. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of a community that refuses to let women's pain and resilience be invisible. Until next time, remember, you are stronger than you know. You deserve truth and honesty in your relationships, and it's never too late to start over. Take care of yourselves and each other. This is Diane, signing off.